It was close to midnight when Mia heard the first knock. Not a polite tap. This one echoed through the old farmhouse like a hammer on hollow wood. She checked the porch. Light. Nothing. Her dog, a usually fearless shepherd, whined and hid behind the couch. The knock came again, louder. Mia's phone had no signal. Every board in the hallway creaked as she crept toward the door. When she finally looked through the peephole, her breath caught. A man stood perfectly still, face hidden by a hood, head tilted upward like he already knew she was watching. He whispered something she couldn't make out, then pressed his forehead against the door. Another whisper. Louder. Mia grabbed the old shotgun her grandfather kept for coyotes, heart racing so hard she thought it might give her away. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the knocking stopped. She waited, minutes, maybe longer. When she finally opened the door at dawn, the porch was empty, except for a single, muddy footprint that didn't match any shoe she'd ever seen. Jake had just moved into a century-old apartment building on the edge of town. The rent was cheap, the ceilings high, and the brick walls gave it a certain charm. Until night fell. On his first evening, he kept hearing soft footsteps above him. Odd, because the landlord had said the unit upstairs was vacant during renovations. At 2 a.m., the steps turned into a slow drag, like someone sliding heavy boots across a dusty floor. Then came a faint hum, a woman's voice, low, tuneless, almost like a lullaby. Jake climbed the creaky staircase, phone flashlight cutting through the dark. The upstairs door hung slightly open. Inside, the rooms were stripped bare. No furniture, no curtains, just pale moonlight spilling across cracked plaster. The humming stopped the second he crossed the threshold. That's when he noticed it. A single rocking chair, gently swaying though the air was still. Before he could back away, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that rattled the windows. The humming started again, this time right next to his ear. Jake bolted, nearly tumbling down the stairs. When he looked back, the door was closed, as if it had never moved. He moved out the next morning without bothering to pack. Carla was driving home late from a weekend shift. The highway an endless black ribbon beneath her headlights. Past midnight, the road was deserted, just a cold wind pushing against her car. In the rearview mirror, she spotted headlights in the distance. At first, it seemed like another traveler, but the lights drew closer far too quickly. Within seconds, a dark sedan was tailgating her, high beams flashing in frantic bursts. Carla's chest tightened. She tapped the brake to signal them to pass. Instead, the car swerved wildly, then settled right behind her again, inches from her bumper. She sped up. So did they. Every exit she planned to take, they mirrored her moves, blocking any chance to escape. Finally, a lone gas station sign flickered ahead. She cut the wheel hard, pulling into the bright wash of the station lights. The sedan screeched to a stop at the edge of the lot. Engine growling, headlights glaring. Then, without warning, it reversed and vanished into the night. The attendant stepped outside, confusion written on his face. Carla could barely speak. When she finally turned, she realized her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold her keys. Even now, she refuses to drive that stretch of highway after dark. Erica was closing the small bookstore she managed when the shop's landline rang. She glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. No one should be calling this late. "Hello?" she said. Static. Then a child's voice whispered, "Don't lock the door." Her skin prickled. "Who is this?" The line went dead. Thinking it was a prank, Erica continued closing. When she finally turned the key in the front lock, the phone rang again, this time from the counter only a few feet away. She picked it up slowly. The same child whispered, "You forgot the back door." Erica spun around. The rear door's deadbolt was halfway turned, as if someone had been inside moments before. She slammed it shut and called the police. When they arrived, the back alley showed fresh footprints in the snow, but no one to match them. On the outskirts of a sleepy Midwest town stands an old iron bridge no one uses after dark. Locals whisper that it waits for travelers, though no one can explain what that means. Liam, a college student home for break, didn't believe the stories. One moonless night, he parked at the bridge's entrance to prove his friends wrong. The air felt heavier as he stepped onto the metal grating. Each footfall clanged like a bell in the empty night. Halfway across, the wind stopped. Then came the sound of another set of footsteps, perfectly matching his own. He spun around. No one. But the echoes continued, growing louder, closer. A low metallic groan rose from beneath the bridge, as though something massive was shifting in the water. Liam ran. Every plank he crossed groaned in rhythm, with the unseen steps chasing him. When he reached the far side and turned, the bridge was empty, but the last section he'd crossed sagged as if someone heavy still stood there. Locals say the iron creaks differently now, like it learned the sound of his fear. Road-weary after a cross-country drive, Trevor pulled into a dusty roadside motel just before midnight. The clerk barely looked up, sliding an old brass key across the counter. "Room 12, she said, voice flat. "Don't open the window." Trevor forced a laugh. "Why not?" She only repeated, "Don't open the window," and turned away. The room smelled faintly of damp wood and cigarette smoke. He showered, tossed his bag on the single bed, and tried to ignore the creaks in the ceiling. Sometime after 2 a.m., a soft scraping sound woke him. It came from the window frame, like a fingernail dragging slowly across glass. He sat up, heart pounding. The scraping stopped. Then came a whisper, low, rasping, almost amused. "Let me in." Trevor stayed frozen, every muscle tight. Minutes stretched into an hour. When dawn finally colored the horizon, he dared a look. The window latch was still locked, but on the outside of the glass were long streaks, as though someone, or something, had clawed at it from the dark. He dropped the key at the desk and left without a word. Later that day, he drove past the motel again out of uneasy curiosity. Room 12's window was boarded shut. Cassie loved solo hikes. The higher the trail, the quieter her thoughts became. And the early autumn air in the Smoky Mountains was perfect. She texted her sister a quick, "Starting now," back before dark, and set off. By late afternoon, the forest grew strangely still. Birdsong faded. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Cassie rounded a bend and spotted a man ahead, tall, wearing a faded red jacket. Relieved to see another hiker, she called out a friendly, "Hello." The man didn't respond. He just kept walking at the same slow pace, hands tucked in his pockets. She tried again, louder. Nothing. When she quickened her step to catch up, the man turned onto a narrow side trail she hadn't noticed. She followed, branches whipping at her arms. The path abruptly ended at a sheer drop overlooking the valley. No man. No footprints. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "You okay? You said you were already heading back an hour ago." Cassie stared at the message. She hadn't sent anything. The silence pressed in until a twig snapped behind her. She spun around, but the trail was empty. Cassie made it back to her car just as the sun disappeared. When she checked the photos on her phone later, every picture from the hike showed the same thing. A red jacket just visible, behind the trees, always a few steps closer than she remembered. Nina was traveling for a business conference when her usual hotel was overbooked. 13. Clerk apologized and offered a free upgrade. Room 313, in an older wing of the building. "Not many guests stay there," he added with a nervous smile. The hallway to 313 smelled faintly of burnt wood. Every step echoed too loudly, as if the corridor were empty for miles. Inside, the room looked perfectly normal. Fresh sheets, soft carpet, a view of the city lights. Still, Nina felt a subtle pressure in her ears, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. Around midnight, she awoke to the faint sound of a door creaking. She reached for the lamp. The EE bulb flickered, but stayed dark. A cold draft swept across the room. From the corner, a low voice whispered her name. She froze, heart hammering. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. No one was there until she saw the bathroom mirror. In the reflection stood a man in an outdated bellhop uniform, his eyes black and hollow. When she spun around, the bathroom was empty. The mirror, however, now showed 3 words traced in condensation, though the air was bone dry. Don't check out. At dawn, she fled the hotel. Later, she learned that room 313 had been permanently closed after a fire decades earlier. The night of bellhop was trapped. Inside, Ethan worked nights at a ETE, remote radio relay station tucked deep in the Nevada desert. His only company was the endless static of shortwave frequencies and the cold, glittering sky. At 2:14 a.m., a crisp, rhythmic pulse cut through the static. 3 quick beeps. A pause. 3 more. He checked the logs. No scheduled transmissions. The beeps formed a pattern. Long, short, repeated over and over. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. Curious, Ethan adjusted the dial. A faint voice slid between the pulses. Ethan, help! His breath hitched. No one was supposed to know he was here, miles from the nearest road. The voice grew clearer, matching his own. Open the door. A metallic knock echoed from the service hatch at the back of the station. 3 sharp raps, perfectly timed with the beeps. He grabbed the emergency radio and called his supervisor. No response, only that same whisper. Open the door. Terrified, Ethan cut the power to every transmitter. The station went black and silent, but in the darkness, the beeping continued, steady and close, as if it were inside the room with him. By dawn, the sound had vanished. When the next crew arrived, they found no footprints outside, no evidence of a transmission, and Ethan pale as the desert sand. He never worked another night shift again. Rain hammered the lonely highway as Claire closed up the small, 24-hour diner. It was nearly 3 a.m., and the neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat. Just as she reached for the lock, the door creaked open and a man stepped inside. Tall, soaking wet, face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brim hat. Coffee, he said, voice low and rough. Claire nodded, nerves buzzing. No cars had passed for hours. She poured the cup, noticing the man never removed his gloves. When she slid the mug across the counter, he didn't drink. Instead, he set a small black notebook in front of her. Read, he whispered. Against her better judgment, Claire opened it. The first page was filled with dates, and every date was today, written over and over. The second page held her name. The third page described, in chilling detail, the exact conversation they were having at that very moment. Her pulse spiked. How? How do you know this? She stammered. The man finally looked up. His eyes were empty. No iris, no color, just endless dark. You always ask that, he replied. The diner lights flickered. Claire blinked, and the stool across from her was empty. The door hadn't opened. The bell hadn't rung, but the coffee cup was gone. Outside, the storm had stopped. The road lay silent under a pale dawn. When the morning staff arrived, they found Claire frozen at the counter, the black notebook still open, now filled with a final line, written in wet ink. See you tonight. Subscribe for next horror videos.